Hey everybody, welcome to SAP Fiori Fundamentals Office Hours number 1. This is an experiment, this is our first one, but we'd like to use this opportunity to do library updates, how-tos, demos, and then it's an opportunity for us to engage with our users. So we can take questions beforehand, we can take questions live, but just want to give back to the community and hopefully grow this project. So today we've got Zack Frazier with us. Welcome, Zack. Let me get your audio up here. And Zach's going to give us a little demo, and I'll throw it to him here in a second. But just want to say hey to everybody and welcome, and we're excited to dig into this. So Zach, just to do a quick audio test.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Hopefully this will go on without a hitch. Yeah, please post any questions you have. We've received a few questions, and after the demo we can go into that. So during the demo, please post anything that you have on your mind, and we can talk about it. I do have some cats, so I'll keep them at bay, but apologies if they run into the stream. So what I want to demo today is how to use fundamentals with an Angular project. I'd say the earliest adopters of our library have been developers that are using Angular, and they have different needs in how they want to consume the library. So I'll show a couple different options today to show you how you can set it up using just a CDN link if you want to use the entire library, or going a little bit more detailed if you want to pick and choose the components you want to use, and then even how to encapsulate styles in your individual components. So do you want to share my screen then?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, great. So the first thing I want to do is start a new Angular project. So I have the Angular CLI installed. And what I'm doing here is just setting up a new Angular project, and I am setting the style extension to SCSS. That is definitely a recommendation. You can do this after you set up the project, but it's better to just add this flag when you create your new project. So while that is installing, wait a second, shouldn't take too long. So it is worth mentioning that we do use Sass. It does what we need it to do in terms of how we use maps, especially for all of our foundation elements. So there's some pretty nice features there, and not to get too into the weeds of the less versus Sass, but it does seem to be a little bit more popular these days. So I've created my new project. I've just changed directories into my project, and what I want to do now is use install Fiori fundamentals. So I'm just saving this as an npm install. If you go to our website and you go to getting started, we do have this posted there as well. So this is installing. Looks like that worked out okay. So now I'm going to start up the server. Let's see if this worked. Oh, I already have one running, it looks like, so let me kill that. And start again. So this will open at localhost 4200. Okay, so this is our basic Angular project, what you see when you do a new project from Angular. If you work with Angular, you're probably familiar with this. So now we want to go in and start doing some customizations, right? So let me open my editor in this project. Okay, so we have the default directory structure. I'm not going to make any major changes to the directory structure just for the sake of the demo. I know there's a lot of opinions out there of how you do this. So the first thing I want to demonstrate is how you can easily add fundamentals using our CDN link, right? So in this case, all I'm going to do is go into the index file. This is the highest level file that is available that holds your app root, just the HTML structure, very, very basic. So here what I want to do is just add a link. Make this a little bit bigger just in case. Add a link, and then I can go back to our getting started page, copy the CDN link, And then go back and add this as an href. And let's go back and see what happened. So you'll see what happened here. Pretty minor, but we can see that it's taking effect because the font has changed. This is the 72 font, which is the default font for all SAP Fiori applications. So we can see that that did change. And the body has also changed. The body background has changed to a very light gray, which is the default for any Fiori 3 application. So we know it's working, right? So that's good. So the next thing I want to do is start to transform this page into something that looks more like an actual Fiori page. So to do that, I'm going to go into my app component. This is the highest level component that the CLI generates. And now I'm going to open this, and we see this is exactly what we saw on the page. Tour of Hero link, CLI documentation center. So we're going to start here. And in this case, I'm going to go to our website and look at our layouts. So if you're starting something from scratch, this is where you want to go. Sort of go down the line, right? Getting started, familiarize yourself with some of the foundations, and then go into the layouts themselves. This is going to give you the very, very high-level page layouts, the shell layout, and then getting more into containers for navigation, footer, etc. So we're going to start with the shell. And the shell contains basically two components that we think of as the shell and the app. I can get into a little bit more detail on that later, but for now I'm just going to copy the very, very high-level shell markup and go back to my page, and I'm going to replace everything here with what I just copied in my app component. And now if I go back here, you'll see it's starting to look like a Fiori 3 application. We have a Shellbar at the top, and we have a main content area, and we have a footer as well. I'm going to remove the footer. Not all applications have footers. That's okay. If you don't, you can remove it. I will also note that there is further documentation on our website. We offer some flavors of different headers. You can fix the header so the main content scrolls underneath it. You can make them all scroll. There are different variants that are available to suit your needs. That's all in the documentation. So the next thing I want to do is go a little bit deeper from the shell. I'm going to go back to the main layouts page, and we're just going to add a page layout here. So in this case, I'm going to just copy this very basic page layout and put it in my main app container. So I'll spend just a minute and explain the structure for those that are interested. We have separated these intentionally, right? We know that with a lot of applications, especially in SAP, there's different pieces to it, right? The shell is really your very, very highest level. It's the global header and just a big box for content, right? That big box then gets separated into a couple different areas. We have what's called the app level. So the app level might then hold some left navigation, top navigation bar, right? This is the application that's running inside of your shell bar. And then we get into what the actual page is. So thinking of it like if I have a side nav, anything I click on the side nav belongs to app. That then affects the page. So I'm just happy to answer any questions on that, but we've tried to separate those out to give a little bit more maximum flexibility to have page run as page, app run as app, and shell run as shell. So now if I go back and make sure I saved that. And now you see we have a header and the shell bar. Now we have a header and we have page content. So it's looking like what we want it to look like. So next step is we will create a shell bar component. So what we want to do is fill in the top part with an actual shell bar. But I'm going to create a separate component for that. So let's do that now. So using the CLI, oops, let me copy this again. So I can do the ng generate component shell bar, and that will just give me the basic scaffolding I need for that. So now if I go in here I can see Shellbar component. It gives me my SAS file, everything I need. So what I want to do in this Shellbar component is now add a Shellbar. So if I go back to our documentation page, in this case I'm going to go into components. We do categorize the Shellbar as its own sort of standalone composite component, so you can find that listed under components. I'm going to scroll down a bit and find a more simple example. We don't need a very complicated Shellbar for the sake of this demo. There are different examples here. You can have a product menu, you can have different links, but I'm just going to use this one for the demo. So now I can go in here. I'm going to replace the default Shellbar markup with our markup. And nothing will happen yet because I need to import Shellbar into the application. So I'm going to go back to my app component TypeScript file. I'm going to import the Shellbar component into the TypeScript file. And then I'm going to go into the app component HTML, and in the shell header area, I'm going to call my app Shellbar. For those of you that are familiar with Angular, the app is just the app namespace is the default thing that's generated in your Angular CLI JSON file. You can change that very, very easily. So if I go back to this, we're now starting to look a lot more like Fury 3 applications. So I've just added a Shellbar very, very easily. And what we're seeing here, since we're bringing in the full library from the CDN, all styles are accounted for, right? So I'm going to do just build this out a little bit more. We're going to add a few more items. I want to add, what I want to do is replace this page header with a hero area. So I want to show how you can use fundamentals to do, I think what they call a well, used to call in Bootstrap maybe. So let's create a new component called hero. So that will now generate the scaffolding I need for that. And then I'm going to import that into my app TypeScript file. That should do it. And then I'm going to add my app hero into this area. I'm actually just going to replace this entire header here. So we see this is the default hero works that Angular creates, so we see it is actually picking that up now. So just to build this out a tiny bit more, we want to add some sections. Sections are really the next thing below your page layout. So if we go back to the documentation, go back to layouts, we can find a area here called section, and we show a couple different examples. These are the things that you would repeat over and over again to give you just the biggest blocks in your page that you would need, right? So once you start building out your page content, you would reuse sections. A section might have a table in it, might have some cards, it might have different content. So those would be stacked on top of each other, and they give you some padding and some very, very basic formatting that you need. So in this case, what I want to do here is I want to create a colored section for my hero. So I'm going to go and just add this section here as part of my hero. And then I'm going to go back to my app component and then replace this page content here with a section. So what we should see now is this, right? So we have a colored section. So you can see it spans the full width. You could easily put a background image in there if you wanted. You could customize that as you needed to. And then we have just a regular section down below. And then within a section, just to go a little tiny bit deeper, within sections themselves, again, they're the very, very highest level container within the page layout. So they hold a couple different types of content. We have what's called a panel grid. So if you need to create a sort of grid structure, this actually uses CSS grid. You can create that. You can just throw those directly in a section. It also holds containers. That's might be the most common usage of it. Containers that then hold columns. So you can see how we can do this here. It's holding a container, the panel can go in there, and then down here we're putting columns, as you see here. We also have, there's one other one it can hold, but I can't think of it right now. So what I'm going to do is just take this panel grid content and add it to that other section that I created. Okay, so this is about where I'm going to stop the building out of the page. We have, quite a few number of components. We have the Shellbar, we have a section, we have the high-level page layouts, and we have a couple of panels. Everything is styled correctly based on having imported that CDN link, right? So what we're doing is we're importing the entire library. Even though we're only using sections and panels and page layouts and Shellbar, we're getting the full library, right? That's a very traditional way of consuming a library. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that if that's how you want to consume the library, right? But now we're going to change and see how we can create a little bit more of a custom setup. So what I'm going to do now is go into my Angular CLI JSON file. Let me just close these. Okay, so I'm going to remove this link that I added. I'll just comment it out for now. Don't need it. And if I go back to my application, you see, yep, all of the styling went away. This is just raw HTML. Absolutely no styling whatsoever, which is what I expected to happen. So now what we're going to do is go into our source file, and I'm going to create a new folder called SCSS. You can call it styles or whatever you want. Doesn't really matter too much. So I'm going to do a basic setup right now. What I recommend doing is creating a couple of files to handle a few common items. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a fonts SCSS file. I'm going to create another file called icons.scss, and I'm going to create a file called core.scss, and I'm going to create a file called settings.scss. I put the underscore under it. That implies that it should not be compiled on its own. It's used as an include, right? These other files are standalone. They can be compiled without a problem. You can create a main core file and put icons and fonts in there. Certainly not a problem, but I just like separating them out a little bit. The reason why we have to have a little bit extra special attention paid to the fonts is if you're consuming the library in a very custom way, you need to make sure that you change your font paths. The fonts will not be picked up properly if you do not set a Sass configuration path for the NPM package. So this is what you would need to do. This will basically tell the Sass file in our distribution package that where to find the fonts files, right? And you need to do the same thing for the icons. This is just a necessity. The paths work fine if you use the full library, but if you want to pick and choose, you have to set these. It'll be pretty obvious. They won't work if you don't do it properly. So that's all we have to do, just set those. This is all documented as well. It's worth pointing out on our website. We have a section at the bottom called resources and how to use SCSS. There's a lot of good information here about why you need to change these paths and such. Okay, so a little bit more setup. What I want to do now is go into the core. Actually, let me do this. Let me go to the Angular CLI right now, and the default here when you create a new project is it creates the styles.scss file, and that is in here, but we're not going to use that, right? So I'm going to override this with my fonts, and I'm going to do the icons as well. So don't believe that gets picked up automatically. I think I have to restart it. All right, what did I do wrong? Let me look at my example here. CSS fonts and icons. Oh, it's not smart enough to use the way you can reference it in the Sass, so I actually have to add the style extension. Makes sense. Okay, let's try that again. Cool. So what I hope to see is the font should have changed. Let's see if it's picking it up. Okay, it is pulling the right style sheets. Oh, I haven't imported the core yet, so it hasn't actually applied that style. So, okay, everything's working fine. So what I want to do now is we're going to create our very sort of high-level core file. We do recommend, if you're using the library, that you bring in our core styles. You can encapsulate the core styles, but these are the very, very high-level styles that give you the padding, margins for a paragraph, your body, background color, rounded corners on an input field. Very, very high-level stuff that we recommend you just bring in by default. So what I want to do, and there's a few other things I recommend you do as well. Since you would likely be using a lot of layout as part of what you're building out, classes or columns and containers, I recommend just bringing those in. It's a pretty lightweight package. And then we also have helpers. I would recommend just bringing these in. Again, if you want to encapsulate styles, you don't have to bring in anything in the core. You can add these into your individual components. But for the sake of convenience, we'll just do it this way. So what I should see then is something should change, hopefully. All right. Okay, what is not working? Oh, I know what I have to do, sorry. My settings file. The reason it's not working is because we haven't imported any settings, right? So let me go into my settings file. And settings is really the file that you would use to import very, very common things like functions and mix-ins and settings, which is all the theme. So the reason we're creating an extra file and importing this separately is because we want to give ourselves the flexibility to be able to add custom colors, to override colors. If you're theming this for a client or a customer, then you might want to modify the colors, right, to match their brand colors and such. So we create our own settings file, and this would be the file that you would reference in your own custom components, which we'll get to in a little bit. So hopefully this will do it. All right. Oh, I know what I need to do. I need to go back to core and import the settings. Okay, so I'm importing the settings. And hopefully this will work. Import settings, make sure my settings are correct. Functions and mix-ins. That is right. Let's see, there's one other file here. Okay, well, I don't know what is happening. Let me just work backwards. Oh, it's always the simple things, right? I'm not importing it right. All right, so instead of, there's one more thing we want to do. since we've added the core now, these are our very, very high level items that we need for everything, our very, very our necessities, right? So we bring in the fonts, the icons, and the core file. Let me recompile this, and this will absolutely work. Okay, yes, it works. So what we're seeing here is a little bit of styling, right? You can see the Shellbar completely went away. We're not importing those component styles, so that's what we would expect to see there. We are importing the layout styles, so the shell continues to work properly, the sections continue to work properly, and the way we're doing this layout here for the panel grid, that continues to work properly. Those are all layout components. So this is exactly what we would expect to see. So what we want to do now is show how we can then go into our Shellbar and we want to add those styles. So I'm opening up my Shellbar CSS file, and here I want to bring in, by default, I need to import my settings file for my project. And then it's always a good idea as well just to bring in your functions and mixins. Any type of component you're creating with custom Sass, you'll need these things. Settings gives you all the color variables, and the functions and mixins are just the handy helpers that you need to access those settings, right? So then what I need to do is import the Shellbar. So this is in Components, Shellbar, and you can see it has worked mostly. This over here is a different component. This is what we call the user menu. So I need to import that as well. There are a lot of our components are composite components, so they do have multiple dependencies. Is it user menu? Let me double check. All right, for the sake of the demo, we'll just ditch that. We don't need it anyway. I don't need anything over here. Oh, I need to bring in the popover as well. User menu and popover. Okay, let's do that. User menu and popover. Popover is used a lot, so it might not be a bad idea just to bring that in by default. Okay, and I think we use an identifier there as well. A menu. So we should bring in menu. And what else? Identifier, yes. That should do it. Okay, perfect. That is exactly what we need. So now if we inspect this, we can see that these styles are being encapsulated. So we're bringing in an identifier by itself. So you can see here, it does what Angular does, add the attribute. So it's only giving you the styles that you absolutely need. We offer multiple sizes of identifiers, but in this case, I'm only getting the extra small size because that's what I'm using. So it's not bringing in the full style sheet for identifier. It's not giving me a lot of extra styles that I don't need. It's only giving me the ones that are absolutely necessary, which of course improve performance and can make sure that you're not getting a lot of style collisions as well. So that's kind of the beauty of Angular, and React, I believe, works in a very similar way. So that's one way that we've tried to build a library to support that as well. So just one other quick thing I wanted to hit on was how you can add custom colors. So if you're building a Fiori 3 application, we certainly don't recommend that you do a lot of color overrides, but if you were theming this for a client or some sort of special purpose, it's absolutely possible to change the look and feel. So what I'm going to do is add another file here called theme. And in my settings file, you can see I've already have it commented out here. I'm going to import my theme. So it's really important that you add in the settings file, and that's again why we created this particular custom settings file, is because when we override, when we want to apply these styles in our own components, we need to have access to those custom colors, right? So I created this file, the theme, and let me just open up my example. And what this allows us to do is, within SAS, what is nice about it is we define all of our foundational items as maps. So this is the way we define colors. Action is what we really call like a brand color, right? Coca-Cola might do a red. SAP uses a blue, right? We have shell colors, really just the color of that background and what the icon colors are. They're slightly lighter blue. And then you can actually create your own things. So in this case, I'm just creating a custom map. These are not part of our regular color palette at all, but I'm just adding them. And then what happens is, since we've imported this before we import the main settings, then these maps get merged together. The colors that we just defined overwrite and add to the colors that are in our default map. So you can see if I go back here, you can see the effect takes place immediately. My Shellbar color was purple, and that's really the only thing we would see in that case, what I've added. So what I want to show you can do there, though, is you can still access our, use our functions, right? So let me remove this accent color helper class. So this is what we call a helper class. We use this syntax where we call it has, and we have a bunch of these. So they really mimic exactly what the CSS rule would be. So you can, we have an background color, we have color, border color. So it's a little verbose, but they should be easy to remember. So you'd always just do FD has, background color, accent 4, text 1, action 2, status colors are semantic, so we have 1 is green, 3 is red, etc. Those are all documented on the website. But what's nice about this is, now that we've added our custom colors, these helpers are output by default. So I can now access those custom colors that we created. I think this should work right. Yeah, so these colors do not exist in our existing color palette, but since I've added them in my custom theme, I can now access them as helpers, because the helpers are output as part of the SAS, right? So the maps are all merged, the helpers get output, and they're available for use in the application. So this would be most useful in a client situation or in any sort of custom theming situation where you needed to add additional colors that maybe didn't come as part of the color palette, and then you can use those either as helpers, or you can access them, as I'll show you here, in your component SAS. So what I'm doing now is I just changed the hero markup, so you can see the background color went away because I removed that helper class. So it's just empty now. So what I want to do is create some overrides, and create some sort of custom styles for that. And so in my hero component SAS file, I'm going to again import those 3 things. Settings file, this is the custom one that we created for this project, functions and mixins. And now I can do some overrides. So I know that I'm using that section here. So I can now say background color, FD color. This is a function that's available to access any color. And now I can say custom 3. So what we should expect to see here is a medium sea green background color, which is what we get. So again, if I look at this, these are encapsulated as well, background color here. And just to show that this is actually working, if I go back to my settings file and I remove theme, then I get a black background. The color function that we use to access all of our colors returns black. If it does not find a color, it just returns black. So if you're trying to do something with a color and you find that it just turns black, that probably means that that color hasn't been defined properly. And just one more thing I'll show is we do offer a lot of accent colors as well. So you can look at the colors documentation on our website and use this color function to access anything, any value that you would need. So accent 4, I don't remember exactly what color that is, but it's that, right? And then additionally, I would just say we have, we also have helpers for type and sizes as well. But in this case, I'll just show you how, if I needed to create my hero image or hero area, I need to set size. Of course, I can create that here in my custom hero area, right? And again, the great thing about it is this is Angular, so it's only applying to that particular section. This section that I have down here, remember, these are both sections, but the height is only going to apply to this section because it's encapsulating that. The other section I use down here is completely unaffected. So I think that's the extent of the demo. Again, what I wanted to show was the easiest way to consume the library, of course, is to consume the CDN link or consume the full library. If you don't want to get too much into style encapsulation, that's fine. People have been doing this for a really, really long time, just importing the full library. It's a great way to get started. If you want to go a little bit deeper, there's a few separate files you can create. And I did take a little bit of a long path here, right? You don't have to create all these separate files, but the things that I would say you would absolutely need to do is I would definitely recommend you create the settings file. That's going to give you the ability to override and create your own custom settings. And then create the core, which is going to bring in just your very, very high-level things. And this is also where you might bring in other libraries, right? If there's other libraries you're using, other dependencies, you would just add them here. If you have your own custom CSS files that you need to create, they could be imported in your core, and you can ensure that they are available. So this is really just the very, very high-level scaffolding that I'd recommend for any kind of base Angular project to give you that flexibility to tap into theming and customizations. So that is the extent of my demo. Thank you.
Cool, man. Very nice. So we don't have any questions.
All right, have we gotten any questions?
In the live chat? No. Do you have any questions that were submitted earlier on from anybody else?
I have a few questions people have been asking me. I did get a question from someone recently via email that asked me, let me ask the exact question. What made you choose to implement one UI element in the framework and not another one? So what this question means is, why are these the components that we chose to implement? Which is a great question, right? We do not have everything that you would need. We are adding new components all the time. But our first priority was to really try to bring parity with Bootstrap, to be completely honest with you. What we found is a lot of teams were using Bootstrap. They would fire up an Angular project, bring in Bootstrap, and Bootstrap is great. I mean, I've used it. I think people are familiar with it. It's one of the most widely used libraries on the planet, right? Great library. The issue is, though, that it is not particularly... it's customizable, but every team would be customizing it on their own, right? So what we wanted to do was to have a library that could replace Bootstrap, that would give you the Fiori 3 theme, would give you everything you'd need without having to do that on your own. There's a lot of advantages in that, because then you can opt into additional themes that we release in the future. We're working right now on a dark theme, All SAP applications should ship with the ability to do a default light theme and a dark theme. So we're working on getting that ready for release. So that's why it's really important in my mind that if you're using a library and you want to do a lot of customization and add your own SAS files, using the color functions, using all the functions we provide, because when you start adding in hex values, you're going to get a little bit further away from all the upgrades of the theme. So the idea is that if we can at least create a library that's in parity with Bootstrap, then teams that are using Bootstrap currently will be able to do a very quick migration to fundamentals. And I think that's would be a great idea for a demo in the future. One of our team members has worked on that, of taking a Bootstrap page and showing how you can migrate to fundamentals as well. So there's another question I've gotten about just updating of our roadmap and what we're planning on doing. So I talked a little bit about that, but I can mention that as well. I would say in the next quarter, a big priority for us is the theming. Now that we're getting very much closer to the final specifications of what this dark theme would be. We want to make sure that we can release that along with our default regular theme. So there'd be a CDN link available to use for a dark theme. So you'd be able to swap out. You could create a settings panel, allow a user to swap out. Browsers are now starting to think about doing automatic switching. Safari Technology Preview has the ability now to hook into a system setting for a dark theme. We know dark themes are very popular right now. Outlook has one, and lots of different products are shipping with them. So I think it's going to be really, really important in the future that we continue to keep up with that trend. So we're spending our time on that. In addition to that, we're starting to build out the shell a little bit more. Our shell component and our page components, we give you very, very high level containers. So we're going to start filling in some of the gaps there and working on some navigation as well. So creating a horizontal navigation component, a sidebar navigation component. We're definitely getting a lot of requests for that, since it is a part of the shell and pretty important. Beyond that, we will just prioritize components. Definitely always encourage people to submit requests. The more we know about what people are doing with the library and where they're finding issues, or if they have priorities for components they're missing, we can at least prioritize those, or maybe help you figure out how to assemble some of the blocks we already have into a custom component. So those are only two that I had received.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's about it then, unless anybody else has anything. Let's see. Will these streams be available as video on this channel? So today we went live on my personal YouTube channel. We have a Fiori Fundamentals account. We just do it right away. So we will post this video on that channel, the correct one, and then from here on out we'll stream on Fiori Fundamentals as well. So we'll link that up on our page, and I'll show you guys the where everything lives on our site here in a moment. I think that's it, man. I think that's all the questions that we got. So just to share, anybody that's going to be watching this video later on, that's not live right now, this is our homepage for SAP Fiori Fundamentals. So we have a couple spots on the site where we mention the office hours and how to find them. Right here on the homepage towards the bottom, we'll put some information for whatever our next session is. So we'll be checking in with the team, see who wants to present next. And then there is a Learn More link to find this. So this is where most of you are probably watching the stream today on this page, but this is also where you can fill out the form here on how to participate. So if you submit a question beforehand, anytime between now and let's say a month from now when we put up our second office hours, we'll collect those questions and we'll answer them live on the chat and on the stream. That's all I got for now. Zach, you got anything else?
No, I think that's a good start. I would just add to what you're saying. Yeah, definitely keep an eye on our website. We continue to send announcements every so often, but keep an eye on the website for the office hours. Definitely encourage you to submit questions in advance. But we will continue to think about demos. If you have any ideas for demos that you'd like to see, that's great. Submit those as well. But it's just a good way for us to have some recorded demos of how to use the library in addition to just answering questions. So yeah, looking forward to the next one.
Cool. for everyone to watch, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, everyone.